The quantum crystals hummed with energy as Thalar placed both hands on the largest formation in the cavern. Light flowed between the crystals in patterns too complex for human eyes to follow, building into something that resonated through the planet's entire consciousness. "It is done," Thalar said. "Your ships can now hear us clearly." Sora activated her communicator, and for the first time in days, heard the familiar crackle of human technology connecting across space. "This is Commander Hayes of the UES Discovery," came a voice from orbit. "Kim Sora, is that you? We've been trying to reach you for 3 days. Status report immediately." "Commander, this is Sora. Jihan and I are alive and well. We've reached the quantum crystal caves, but the situation is more complex than anyone anticipated." "Complex how? Are you in danger? Do you need extraction?" Sora looked around the beautiful crystal cavern, then at Thalar waiting patiently nearby. "No, sir, we're safe. But I need you to hear something important. I'm going to let someone else explain." She gestured to Thalar, who stepped forward to address the communicator. When the Keeper spoke, their voice carried through the crystal network with perfect clarity. "Greetings, humans of the star paths. I am Keeper Thalar, voice of the consciousness you call Verdania Prime. Your representatives have reached our most sacred space, and we wish to discuss the future of both our species." Silence from orbit for several long moments. Then, "This is unexpected. Are you holding our people prisoner?" "Not at all," Thalar replied. "They are our honored guests, but before any of your kind attempt to claim our world's crystals, there are truths you must understand." Over the next hour, Thalar explained everything. The true nature of the quantum crystals as parts of a planetary consciousness. The offer of biocrystals as an alternative. The choice between partnership and exploitation. "Commander." Hayes's responses grew increasingly troubled. "You're asking us to give up the greatest prize in galactic history for plants that might work?" "Not give up," Sora interjected. "Trade up. The biocrystals could provide everything we need without destroying a living world." "That's assuming we can trust an alien intelligence we've never encountered before." "Commander," Jihan spoke up, "with respect, we've spent 3 days here. The jungle could have killed us 100 times over, but instead it helped us, protected us, taught us. If Thalar wanted to harm humanity, they've had every opportunity. But we have no guarantee these biocrystals will perform as promised." Thalar stepped forward again. "Then test them. We offer a sample of our biocrystal technology freely given. Take them to your scientists. Study them for as long as you need. Only when you are satisfied with their potential do we ask for your answer about the quantum crystals." There was another long pause. Sora could imagine the heated discussions happening aboard the Discovery as military officers, scientists, and diplomats debated this unexpected turn of events. "Finally, Commander," Hayes spoke again. "The Science Council wants to speak with you directly, Kim Sora. They're sending a shuttle to collect you and your samples." "Just me?" Sora asked. "The situation planetside is too valuable to abandon. Park Jihan will remain to continue negotiations, while you present our findings to the Fleet Command." Sora felt a chill of unease. She knew military thinking well enough to recognize what was happening. They were separating the team, keeping Jihan as a potential hostage while extracting their primary scientist and any valuable samples. "Commander, I don't think," she began. "That's an order, Dr. Kim. Prepare for extraction in 2 hours." The communication ended, leaving an uncomfortable silence in the crystal cavern. Thalar looked troubled, their flower-adorned hair shifting, color to deeper, more somber hues. "Your leaders do not trust easily," Thalar observed. "They're scared," Sora replied. "Humans have dreamed of quantum crystals for generations. To be asked to give up that dream for an unknown alternative, it's asking a lot. And if they refuse our offer?" Sora didn't answer immediately. She knew human nature, knew how political and military leaders thought. The quantum crystals represented not just energy, but power on a galactic scale. Some people would find it impossible to walk away from that, regardless of the moral cost. "We need to give them a reason to choose partnership over conquest," she said finally. "What kind of reason?" Sora walked to the edge of the crystal cavern, where she could see out through natural windows in the rock. The jungle stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and alive. But she was also thinking about the 47 expeditions that had failed here. "Thalar, when you defended against previous expeditions, how much of your full power did you actually use?" The keeper's expression grew thoughtful. "Very little. We defended ourselves with the minimum force necessary. We are not a warlike consciousness. But you could do more if you needed to?" "Yes, far more. Then maybe it's time to show the fleet what they would really be fighting if they chose conquest over cooperation." Thalar understood immediately. "A demonstration of power. But that could be seen as a threat, or as an incentive to negotiate," Jihan said. "Sora's right. Right now, the fleet sees Verdania Prime as a target. They can overwhelm with enough firepower. They need to understand that this world can defend itself." 2 hours later, a human shuttle descended through Verdania Prime's atmosphere. Sora watched it approach with mixed feelings. She carried samples of biocrystals and detailed recordings of everything they had learned. But she also carried the weight of knowing that her report might determine whether two species became partners or enemies. "Remember," Thalar said as she prepared to leave, "your people are not evil. They are simply afraid and ambitious, as all young species are. Help them see that there is strength in cooperation, not just in taking. And if I can't convince them, then we will defend ourselves. But we hope it will not come to that." Sora boarded the shuttle with her samples and data. As it lifted off, she watched the jungle shrink below her until Verdania Prime became just a green sphere against the black of space. Aboard the Discovery, she was immediately taken to the main briefing room where senior officers and scientists waited. Fleet Admiral Chen presided over the meeting, her weathered face showing no emotion as Sora presented her findings. The biocrystal demonstrations went well. The samples powered human technology perfectly, showing adaptive energy output that was actually superior to quantum crystals in many applications. The potential for terraforming was extraordinary. But when Sora explained the choice Verdania Prime had offered, the room erupted in argument. "Absolutely not," declared General Morrison. We didn't come this far to be held hostage by alien demands. If this jungle consciousness wants to negotiate, it can do so from a position of weakness, not strength. General, Sora said carefully, you don't understand what we'd be facing if we tried to take the crystals by force. A few carnivorous plants and some clever traps. We've analyzed the recordings from previous expeditions. Our technology is far superior to anything that's been tried before. Dr. Sarah Chen, the expedition's lead xenobiologist, leaned forward. Actually, General, I think Dr. Kim's recommendations deserve serious consideration. The biocrystals alone represent a breakthrough that could revolutionize human civilization, but not as much as the quantum crystals would, Admiral Chen pointed out. The biocrystals are impressive, but the quantum crystals are legendary. The energy output readings we've seen suggest power levels that could make humanity the dominant species in the galaxy. At the cost of destroying a unique consciousness, Sora argued. We're talking about essentially murdering an entire planet for its resources. We're talking about securing humanity's future, General Morrison shot back. Sometimes difficult choices have to be made for the greater good. The debate continued for hours, with scientists generally supporting the biocrystal alternative, while military officers pushed for claiming the quantum crystals. Sora presented every argument she could think of, but she could see that fear and ambition were winning over wisdom. Finally, Admiral Chen called for a preliminary vote. The result was close, but the quantum crystal faction won by a narrow margin. Dr. Kim, the Admiral said, you'll return to the surface tomorrow with a full military escort. Your job will be to convince this Keeper Thalar to surrender the quantum crystals peacefully. If they refuse, we'll proceed with extraction by force. Admiral, that's a mistake. You have no idea what you'd be facing. We'll take our chances. Humanity didn't become a starfaring species by backing down from challenges. That night, Sora sat in her quarters and tried to contact Jihan on the surface. The communication went through, but she could tell from his voice that Thalar was listening. They've made their choice, she said simply. I understand, Jihan replied. Thalar says they're disappointed but not surprised. They're preparing for what comes next. What does that mean? I think we're about to find out what Verdania Prime looks like when it's really trying to defend itself. As if in response to his words, every sensor aboard the Discovery suddenly lit up with alerts. Something was happening on the planet below, energy readings that dwarfed anything they... 6 months later, Sora stood in the same crystal cavern where humanity's future had been decided. But now it looked different. Human technology blended seamlessly with organic crystal formations. Biocrystal gardens grew in carefully tended plots. Scientists from both species worked side by side, sharing knowledge that was revolutionizing both civilizations. The partnership agreement had taken weeks to negotiate, but the results exceeded everyone's expectations. Humanity gained access to biocrystal technology that was in many ways superior to quantum crystals. The biocrystals could be cultivated, were self-repairing, and seemed to actively enhance rather than simply power human devices. In return, Verdania Prime gained something it had dreamed of for millennia, the ability to spread beyond its home world. Human ships now carried biocrystal seeds to dead planets across the galaxy, worlds that were slowly awakening to new life under the gentle guidance of Verdanian consciousness. The terraforming of Kepler 442b is ahead of schedule, Jihan reported, reading from a tablet powered by a biocrystal that pulsed with soft blue light. The planet's atmosphere is already showing signs of stabilization, and the first forest groves should be established within 2 years. Excellent, Thalar said, their appearance now more familiar after months of interaction. The Keeper had taken on a more humanoid form to make communication easier, though flowers still bloomed in their hair and their eyes held the deep wisdom of an ancient forest. Dr. Sarah Chen looked up from a microscope where she was studying biocrystal cellular structure. We're seeing applications we never imagined. Medical biocrystals that can diagnose and treat diseases at the cellular level. Agricultural variants that can restore dead soil in a single growing season. Even space travel crystals that seem to make ships more efficient by understanding their destination. And the quantum crystals? Sora asked. Remain untouched, as agreed, Thalar confirmed. Our world's consciousness is intact, and actually growing stronger as we learn from human knowledge. Your scientific methods, combined with our organic wisdom, create possibilities neither species could achieve alone. The real proof of the partnership's success was visible everywhere in the growing settlement. Human buildings grown from modified plants that regulated their own temperature and atmosphere. Verdanian gardens that produced food specifically adapted to human nutritional needs. Transportation pods that were living creatures bred to carry passengers safely through the jungle canopy. My grandfather would have loved this, Sora said, watching human children play with young Verdanian sprouts in a courtyard where both species, offspring, learned together. He would be proud of the choice you made, Jihan agreed. Though I suspect he already knew what you would decide. That evening, Sora sat in her quarters, a living room grown from a single massive tree, and activated a communication link to Earth. The biocrystal network could now transmit messages across galactic distances almost instantly, connecting human colonies and Verdanian gardens scattered across dozens of worlds. Her grandfather's face appeared on the organic screen, wrinkled but bright with curiosity. At 94, he was still sharp enough to understand the technical reports she sent him, though he was more interested in the philosophical implications. Grandfather, she said in Korean, I wanted to thank you again. Your journals saved not just our lives, but our entire civilization. The old man smiled. I just wrote down what the mountains taught me, little flower. That wisdom was older than me, and it will be older than you too. But you taught me how to read it, how to listen to what the land was trying to say, and now you teach others. That is how knowledge grows, not by hoarding it, but by sharing it like seeds carried on the wind. Behind him, Sora could see the small garden he tended in his soul apartment. But now some of the plants were biocrystal variants sent from Verdania Prime, glowing softly with their own inner light and producing air so pure it had added years to the old man's life. The biocrystals are helping people all over Earth, she told him. Healing pollution, restoring damaged ecosystems, providing clean energy for everyone. Some politicians are calling it the greatest breakthrough in human history. And what do you call it? Sora thought for a moment, looking out her window at the living city growing around her. I call it what happens when you choose to plant gardens instead of digging graves. Her grandfather laughed. Your grandmother would have said the same thing. She always believed the best victories were the ones where everyone won. After the call ended, Sora walked through the settlement to the central plaza where a ceremony was taking place. Representatives from 12 human colonies and 6 Verdanian garden worlds had gathered to sign the expansion accords, agreements that would spread their partnership to new star systems. Admiral Chen, now serving as humanity's ambassador to the Verdanian collective, stood beside Thaler as they formalized humanity's commitment to responsible terraforming. Every new world would be approached as a potential partner, not a resource to be exploited. 6 months ago, we came here seeking quantum crystals, Admiral Chen said to the assembled crowd. We thought we needed raw power to secure our future. Instead, we found something far more valuable: the wisdom to build that future in harmony with the universe around us. General Morrison, surprisingly, had become one of the partnership's strongest advocates. The military applications of biocrystal technology were impressive, but more importantly, the cooperation with Verdania Prime had essentially eliminated the need for military force. When every world was a partner rather than a conquest, there were far fewer wars to fight. The galaxy is vast, Morrison said during his speech, and there are wonders we haven't even imagined yet. But now we approach them not as conquerors, but as gardeners, not seeking to take what we need, but to cultivate what we all need. As the ceremony concluded with the planting of a new biocrystal tree that would connect this settlement to the galactic network, Sora found herself standing next to Keeper Thaler. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Trusting humanity instead of simply driving us away? Every species faces the same choice your people faced, Thaler replied. Take what you want by force, or work together to create something better than either could achieve alone. Most choose force because it seems easier. But your species chose wisdom, and that gives us hope for others we may encounter. Others? The galaxy is vast, as your General Morrison said. There are other young species out there, other worlds that might benefit from what we've learned together. Perhaps someday there will be a network of partnerships spanning all the stars. Sora looked up at the night sky, where human ships powered by biocrystals carried seeds of life to distant worlds. Each light might be a planet where the partnership between technology and nature was taking root. Each star might be a place where her grandfather's wisdom about working with the land instead of against it was being proven true on a cosmic scale. He was right. You know, she said softly. Your grandfather? He always said that the most important survival skill wasn't taking what you needed. It was knowing when not to take it. She smiled as a bioluminescent flower bloomed in response to her words. And sometimes, when you're wise enough not to take something, the universe gives you something even better. High above them, stars, shone down on a galaxy where 2 species had chosen partnership over conquest, cooperation over competition. And in the gentle glow of biocrystal gardens spreading across a dozen worlds, The future grew brighter with each passing day. In a small apartment in Seoul, an old man tended his glowing plants and smiled, knowing that the wisdom of mountains and forests would live on among the stars. The camping hacks that had once helped him survive a war had become the foundation for peace across the galaxy. Some victories, he thought, were worth waiting 94 years to see. The transport ship shuddered as it entered Verdania Prime's atmosphere. Through the small windows, Sora could see endless green stretching to every horizon. The jungle looked peaceful from above, but she knew that was an illusion. Somewhere down there, the remains of 47 expeditions lay scattered among plants that had learned to kill. "Drop zone approaching," the pilot announced. "All teams prepare for deployment." The cargo bay was divided into sections for each team. The aliens made final checks on their equipment while Sora sat quietly with her simple backpack. Inside were basic camping tools, her grandfather's notes, and a few items that other teams would consider worthless. Things like salt, fishing line, and small metal mirrors. Rextar stomped past in his black armor, weapon systems humming with power. "Try not to die too quickly, little mouse," he growled. "I want the jungle to at least work up an appetite before eating you." "First drop zone, Draknari team," the pilot called. A section of the floor opened to reveal green jungle below. Rextar and Thexara leaped out without hesitation, their forms disappearing into the canopy. Sora watched them fall and noticed something interesting. Birds scattered from the trees where they landed, and she could see plants beginning to shift and move even from this height. Second drop zone, Zephyrite team, Velnara and Kethmore, stepped to the edge. Their crystal bodies reflected light in complex patterns as scanning devices hummed around them. They jumped in perfect synchronization, their mathematical minds already calculating optimal paths through the jungle. One by one, teams dropped into different sections of the vast forest. The Mantari with their collective intelligence. The Luminoids with their energy consciousness. Species after species with technologies and abilities that defied human understanding. "Final drop zone, human team!" Sora and Jihan stood at the edge and looked down. The jungle stretched below them like a green ocean. From here, it looked almost gentle, just trees and flowers and vines. But Sora's trained eye could see the subtle signs of danger, plants that grew in patterns too perfect to be natural, clearings that were too round, too empty, colors that were too bright, advertising either poison or mimicry. "Remember," Sora said quietly, "we're not here to conquer anything. We're guests in someone else's home. Guests who want to steal their most valuable possession," Jihan pointed out. "Maybe. Or maybe we're here to prove that we deserve it." They jumped. The fall through the canopy was like diving through layers of green light. Branches whipped past them as they deployed their parachutes. Sora guided her descent toward a small clearing that looked safe. Not too open, not too closed, with water nearby, but not standing pools where predators might wait. They landed gently and immediately began gathering their chutes. The jungle around them was alive with sound, bird calls, insect buzzes, the rustle of leaves in wind that seemed to blow from no particular direction. "It's beautiful," Jihan said, looking around at the towering trees and exotic flowers. It's watching us, Sora replied, and she was right. Though nothing seemed obviously threatening, there was a sense of being observed, evaluated, tested. She knelt and touched the soil with her bare hand, just as her grandfather had taught her. The earth felt rich and alive, but there was something else, a vibration, like a very slow heartbeat. The whole jungle is connected, she realized. It's not just individual plants and animals. It's one big organism. How can you tell? The rhythm. My grandfather taught me to feel for the pulse of a forest. Most places have many different rhythms, trees growing at their own pace, animals with their own cycles. But here, everything beats together. As if responding to her words, a flower near Jihan's foot began to open. It was beautiful, purple petals with silver edges. But Sora grabbed his arm and pulled him back. Don't look directly at it, she warned, and hold your breath. The flower finished opening and released a small puff of glittering pollen. Where the pollen landed, other plants began to change color. A warning system, Sora realized. The jungle was announcing their presence to everything within miles. So much for stealth, Jihan muttered. Actually, this might be good, Sora said. We're not trying to sneak past anything. We want the jungle to know we're here. She pulled out one of her grandfather's photos and compared it to their surroundings. The old man had camped in forests across Korea, and he'd written about reading the mood of each place. Some forests were welcoming to careful visitors, others were hostile to any intrusion, a few were actively malevolent. What's the mood here? Jihan asked, noticing her concentration. Curious, Sora said after a moment. It's not automatically hostile. It's evaluating us. They began to move deeper into the jungle, following what appeared to be a game trail. Sora moved slowly, stopping, frequently to examine plants and listen to sounds. Her grandfather had taught her that every forest spoke to those who knew how to listen. Behind them, the flower that had announced their presence slowly closed its petals. But Sora noticed that it didn't return to its original color. It stayed, slightly purple, as if marking their passage for future reference. We're being cataloged, she told Jihan. The jungle is learning about us. Is that bad? Depends on what conclusions it reaches. They encountered their first obvious trap within an hour. A section of trail that looked perfectly safe but felt wrong somehow. The plants were too neat, the spacing too regular. Sora's grandfather had written about places that felt like stage sets, beautiful but artificial. Pitfall trap, she diagnosed. Probably spikes at the bottom, maybe poison too. How do we get around it? Instead of answering immediately, Sora did something that would have baffled the alien teams. She sat down next to the trail and pulled out a small cooking pot. From her pack, she took some dried tea leaves and began brewing tea with water from her canteen. You're making tea? Jihan asked incredulously. Now? My grandfather always said that important decisions should never be made in haste, Sora replied calmly. And the best way to understand a place is to sit quietly and let it get used to you. As the tea steeped, Sora observed the jungle around them, small movements in the undergrowth, bird calls that seemed to carry specific messages, the way vines grew in certain patterns that might indicate soil composition or root systems below. "There," she said after 15 minutes, pointing to a section of jungle that looked impenetrable. "We go through there. That solid wall of thorns. Look closer." Jihan did, and slowly began to see what she meant. The thorns grew in a specific pattern that left narrow gaps. It would be difficult to navigate, but possible for someone moving slowly and carefully. "The jungle is testing us," Sora explained, as they began pushing through the thorny passage. "The obvious path is a trap. The difficult path is the real way through." It took 2 hours to traverse what should have been a 10-minute walk, but they emerged on the other side unharmed. Behind them, they heard a loud crack as something heavy fell into the pitfall trap they had avoided. "Another team," Jihan said, grimly. They pressed on, always moving toward the center of the continent where the quantum crystals waited. But Sora set a pace that seemed maddeningly slow to Jihan. She stopped to examine every unusual plant, to listen to every new sound, to feel the soil and smell the air. "We're never going to reach the center at this rate," he complained. "Speed kills in places like this," Sora replied. "My grandfather survived in enemy territory by moving like a careful deer, not a charging bull." As if to prove her point, they heard explosions in the distance, weapon fire, the sound of something large crashing through trees, then screams that were cut short. "Rextar's team," Sora said sadly. "They're fighting the jungle instead of listening to it." That evening, they made camp in a small grove that felt safe. Sora built a fire using techniques her grandfather had taught her, specific arrangements of stones and wood that created minimal smoke but maximum warmth. She cooked simple food and shared it with Jihan while watching the jungle around them. "The plants are moving closer," Jihan observed. Vines and small trees had shifted position since they arrived, creating a loose circle around their camp. "They're curious about the fire," Sora said. "My grandfather wrote that fire is the universal language. Every living thing understands its power." "Aren't they dangerous?" "Those could be carnivorous plants." "Maybe. But look how they're approaching. Slowly, carefully. If they wanted to attack, they would have done it already." As the fire burned down, bioluminescent flowers began to glow around them. Blues and greens and soft purples, creating a natural cathedral of living light. It was beautiful beyond words, and Jihan found himself relaxing despite their dangerous situation. "Your grandfather was right," he said. "This place does have a spirit, and I think it might be willing to help us." Sora smiled and added, "Another small piece of wood to the fire. Tomorrow we'll find out for sure." In the distance, they could hear other sounds of conflict. Teams using advanced technology to blast their way through obstacles. The jungle's response was swift and terrible. Roars of anger, the crash of falling trees, and then silence. But around the human camp, the jungle settled into peaceful rest. Bioluminescent flowers dimmed to soft nightlights. Small animals moved through the undergrowth without fear. Night birds sang gentle songs instead of warning calls. The third day brought them to the edge of what Sora's maps labeled as the Inner Circle, a region where no previous expedition had survived long enough to send back meaningful data. The jungle here was different from anything they had seen before. The trees grew in perfect geometric patterns, creating natural corridors that seemed to lead in specific directions. Flowers bloomed in mathematical sequences. Even the ground itself formed shapes that looked almost like writing. "It's not just alive," Jihan said, staring at the organized landscape. "It's architectural." "My grandfather wrote about sacred groves in Korea," Sora said, consulting her notes. Places where the forest had been shaped by centuries of careful tending. Not built, but guided into patterns that served specific purposes. They entered the inner circle following a pathway marked by blue-leaved trees. The plants here didn't just watch them, they actively responded to their presence. Flowers turned to track their movement. Vines shifted to create handholds exactly where they were needed. Small streams appeared to provide fresh water when they felt thirsty. "It's taking care of us," Jihan observed. "Or preparing us for something," Sora replied. The first major challenge came when they reached what appeared to be a solid wall of thorns blocking their path. The barrier stretched in both directions as far as they could see and rose high above the tallest trees. There was no obvious way around it, and the thorns looked sharp enough to cut through metal. But as they approached, Sora noticed something that made her pause. The thorns were arranged in a specific pattern, not random, but deliberate. It reminded her of something from her grandfather's notes about traditional Korean gardens. "It's a puzzle," she realized. "Look at how the thorns grow. They're not blocking the path, they're creating a lock." She studied the pattern more carefully, comparing it to sketches in her grandfather's journals. He had written about visiting ancient temples where stone arrangements served as both barriers and tests. Only those who understood the underlying philosophy could find the way through. "Here," she said, pressing her hand against a section of thorns that looked identical to all the others. But at her touch, they began to retract, revealing a narrow opening. "How did you know?" Jihan asked as they squeezed through the gap. "My grandfather wrote about the concept of Jung, finding harmony with your surroundings instead of fighting them. The thorns weren't there to keep us out. They were there to test whether we would try to force our way through or look for the gentle solution. Once past the thorn barrier, they found themselves in a garden unlike anything on Earth. Plants from dozens of different ecosystems grew together in impossible harmony. Arctic flowers bloomed next to tropical vines. Desert cacti thrived alongside. Water lilies. It should have been chaos, but instead it was perfectly balanced. At the center of the garden stood a structure that took their breath away. It wasn't built. It was grown. Living trees had been shaped into walls and arches, their branches weaving together to form rooms and corridors. Bioluminescent moss provided gentle lighting throughout the organic architecture. "Someone lives here," Sora said quietly. "Or something," Jihan added, noting movement in the shadows of the tree building. A figure emerged from the living structure, and both humans stepped back in surprise. It was humanoid in shape, but clearly not human. Its skin had the bark-like texture of ancient trees, and its hair was made of flowing vines dotted with small flowers. Most striking were its eyes, deep green with gold flecks, like sunlight filtering through a forest canopy. "Welcome, wanderers from the star paths," the being said in a voice like wind through leaves. "I am Keeper Thalar, guardian of the inner circle." "You're not from any species we know," Jihan said, hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. "No," Thalar agreed. "I am what this world creates when it has need of a voice, born from the junction of many minds, many natures. I speak for the consciousness you call jungle, but which is far more than you understand." Sora bowed respectfully, remembering her grandfather's teachings about showing proper respect in sacred places. "We are honored to meet you, Keeper Thalar. We seek passage to the crystal caves." "I know why you have come," Thalar said, gesturing, "for them to follow. As I have known of all who came before you. 47 expeditions, each certain they could take what they desired through force or cleverness. They walked through the garden, as Thalar spoke. Plants seemed to bend aside to create a pathway, then close behind them once they had passed. Each species brought their greatest strengths," the keeper continued. "The Draknari brought warrior, courage. The Zephyrites brought mathematical precision. The Mantari brought collective wisdom. All valuable gifts, but incomplete." "Incomplete how?" Sora asked. "They came to take, not to understand. They saw the crystals as objects to be claimed, rather than as part of a living system. They could not conceive that the jungle might have its own purposes for those crystals." Thalar led them to a circular clearing where crystal formations grew naturally from the earth. These were smaller than the legendary deposits at the planet's center, but they pulsed with the same mysterious energy. "Watch," Thalar said, and touched one of the crystals. Immediately, the entire garden began to glow with soft light. Plants that had been wilting stood straighter. Flowers that were closed opened to reveal brilliant colors. The air itself seemed to become more alive, more energized. "The crystals are not just valuable minerals," Thalar explained. "They are the nervous system of this world. They carry information, coordinate growth, maintain the balance that allows such diversity to coexist in harmony. So if we take them," Jihan began. "You would be cutting the nerves from a living being," Thalar finished. "The jungle would not die immediately, but it would become diminished. The careful balance would collapse. Within a generation, this garden world would become an ordinary forest." Sora felt her heart sink. She thought of Earth, of the dead worlds humans might terraform with crystal technology. But she also looked around at the impossible beauty of Verdania Prime, an entire planet that was essentially one vast, conscious garden. "But you haven't stopped us yet," she pointed out. "You could have killed us a dozen times over. Why let us get this far?" Thalar smiled, and flowers bloomed in their hair as they did. "Because you are the first to arrive not seeking conquest, but seeking understanding. the first to move through our domain as guests rather than invaders. The first to show that taking might not be your only purpose. What do you mean? Your species is young but shows great promise. You adapt. You learn. You change your thinking when presented with new information. Perhaps there is another way to accomplish your goals. Thalar led them deeper into the tree structure, through rooms where the walls themselves pulsed with gentle life. In the center, they found a laboratory unlike anything either human had ever seen. Plants grew in patterns that resembled circuit boards. Flowers opened and closed in sequences that looked like computer code. Vines carried droplets of liquid from one organism to another in processes that seemed both biological and technological. We have been studying the visitors who came before, Thalar explained. Learning about their technologies, their needs, their civilizations. We have developed alternatives. They stopped before a collection of objects that seemed to blend organic and mechanical elements. Seeds that glowed with their own light. Pods that could apparently store vast amounts of information. Fruits that pulsed with energy patterns similar to quantum crystals. Biocrystals, Thalar said. Grown rather than mined. They carry much of the same energy as the quantum crystals, but they can be cultivated without destroying the source. They grow, reproduce, adapt to new environments. Sora picked up one of the seeds, feeling it warm in her palm. The energy was different from quantum crystals. Gentler, more alive, but clearly powerful. These could power our ships? She asked. And more. They could terraform your dead worlds, not by forcing life to grow, but by teaching dead soil how to live again. They could heal rather than simply energize. Jihan looked skeptical. Why would you offer us this? What do you get in return? Partnership, Thalar said simply. Your species has something we lack. The ability to travel between stars easily. We have watched other civilizations from afar, but never been able to reach them. If we shared our biocrystals with humanity, perhaps some of your people could stay here to learn our ways, and perhaps some of us could travel with you to see other worlds. You want to leave Verdania Prime? Not leave. Expand. We dream of gardens among the stars, worlds where the boundaries between technology and nature disappear, cities that grow rather than being built, ships that live rather than merely fly. Sora felt her grandfather's teachings echoing in her mind. The old man had always said that the best solutions were the ones where everyone won. Not victory through conquest, but success through cooperation. This could work, she said slowly. But we're just two people. We can't speak for all of humanity. No, Thalar agreed. But you can return with proof that another way is possible. You can plant the seed of an idea that might grow into something beautiful. And if humanity rejects the offer, if they come back with armies to take the quantum crystals by force? Thalar's expression grew sad but determined. Then we will defend ourselves as we always have. That night, sleep came difficult for both humans. They had been given a room in the living tree structure, where the walls glowed softly with bioluminescent patterns, and the floor was covered in moss softer than any bed. but comfort could not quiet their troubled thoughts. Sora sat by the organic window, reading her grandfather's journals by the gentle light of the room itself. Jihan paced restlessly, occasionally stopping to examine the biocrystals Thalar had given them to study. "Your grandfather really never wrote about anything like this?" Jihan asked, holding up one of the seed-like objects. It pulsed with a warm golden light, almost like a tiny heartbeat. "Not exactly," Sora said. "But he wrote a lot about choices, about moments when doing the easy thing and doing the right thing weren't the same." She found a particular passage and read it aloud, translating from her grandfather's Korean. He wrote, "During the war, I found an enemy supply cache hidden in a cave. Taking it would have helped our forces greatly. But the cave was also home to a family of bears with cubs. I could have driven them out or killed them, but instead I found another way to help my side. Sometimes the greatest victory comes from recognizing what you should not take, even when you have the power to take it." Jihan set down the biocrystal and joined her at the window. Outside, the garden glowed with its own mysterious light. Night blooming, flowers created patterns of blue and silver among the trees. Small creatures moved through the undergrowth, not hiding, but going about their peaceful business without fear. "It's beautiful," he admitted, "but we have responsibilities back home. Humanity needs those quantum crystals. Does it? Or does humanity need what the crystals can provide? What's the difference?" Sora picked up one of the biocrystals and felt its warm energy. "My grandfather once told me about two farmers who both needed water for their crops. One farmer built a dam that stopped the river from flowing to his neighbor's farm. The other farmer dug channels that brought water to both farms. Both got what they needed, but only one did it without causing harm." "You're saying the biocrystals are the channels instead of the dam?" "Maybe, if they really work as well as Thaler claims." They spent the next few hours testing the biocrystals with their equipment. The results were extraordinary. The organic energy sources could power their devices just as effectively as quantum crystals, but with subtle differences. While quantum crystals provided raw, overwhelming power, biocrystals seemed to adapt their energy output to exactly what was needed. More efficient, more harmonious, more alive. "These could revolutionize human technology," Jihan said, watching his scanner run on biocrystal power with perfect stability. "But can we trust an alien consciousness we just met? Can we trust ourselves with the quantum crystals?" Sora countered. "Look at human history. Every time we've found a new source of power, we've found ways to use it for destruction as well as creation. That's different. We're more civilized now." "Are we? We came here with weapons. We plan to take the crystals by force if necessary. Every species that came before us probably told themselves they were civilized too." As dawn approached, they were visited by Thalar again. The keeper moved through the garden like a spirit of the forest itself, flowers blooming in their footsteps. "Have you reached a decision?" Thalar asked gently. "We need to see the quantum crystals first," Sora said, "to understand what we're being asked to give up." "A wise request. Very well. But know that once you see them, The choice becomes final. You cannot unknow what you will learn. Thalar led them out of the inner circle through a path none of the previous expeditions had found. Trees parted like curtains to reveal a trail that seemed to lead directly toward the center of the continent. As they walked, the jungle around them grew more magnificent and strange. Plants here had clearly been shaped by the quantum crystal's energy for countless generations. Trees grew in spirals that reached impossible heights. Flowers bloomed in colors that had no names. Vines carried streams of pure light from one organism to another, creating a visible network of energy throughout the forest. "This is what your world could become," Thalar said, noting their amazement. "Not through conquest, but through partnership between consciousness and nature." They reached the crystal caves by midday. The entrance was a natural archway formed by two massive trees whose roots had grown together over centuries. Beyond the arch, the cavern glowed with light that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Inside, Sora and Jihan stood speechless before the most beautiful sight either had ever witnessed. The quantum crystals grew like an underground forest of pure light. Some formations were delicate as flowers, others massive as towers. The entire cavern pulsed with gentle rhythms that seemed to synchronize with their own heartbeats. 300 years of expeditions died trying to reach this place, Jihan whispered. "And now we're here," Sora replied. "The question is, what do we do now that we've made it?" Thalar stepped forward and placed a hand on one of the smaller crystal formations. Immediately, the entire cavern responded. Light flowed through connections between crystals, creating patterns that were clearly some form of communication or coordination. "Watch," Thalar said. "See what you would truly be taking." The light patterns grew more complex, and suddenly Sora and Jihan could sense what the crystals were doing. They were regulating the entire planet's ecosystem, coordinating weather patterns, managing the delicate balance that allowed thousands of different species to coexist, maintaining the consciousness that bound the whole world together into a single, vast, thinking organism. "They're not just valuable minerals," Sora breathed. "They're the planet's brain, and nervous system, and memory storage, and much more." Thalar confirmed. "Remove them, and Verdania Prime becomes just another ordinary world. Beautiful, perhaps, but not alive in the way it is now." Jihan stared at the crystals with new understanding. Every expedition that tried to take these was essentially planning to lobotomize an entire planet. "They did not know," Thalar said kindly. "How could they? Your species, all species, see individual objects rather than connected systems. It is not a failing. It is simply a different way of understanding the universe." "But now we do know," Sora said, "which makes our choice different from all the others." She walked deeper into the cavern, studying the crystal formations. Her grandfather had taught her to read natural systems, and this was the most complex she had ever encountered. Every crystal served multiple purposes. Every connection carried layers of information. It was like looking at the brain of a god. "Could you survive without them?" she asked Thalar. "If we took just a few, would the planet die?" "Not immediately," Thalar admitted. We could adapt, find other ways to maintain our coordination, but we would be less. Imagine if someone removed part of your brain. You might survive, but you would no longer be fully yourself. Sora nodded slowly. She thought of her grandfather's words about recognizing what should not be taken. But she also thought of Earth, overcrowded, polluted, struggling to feed its billions of inhabitants. Of dead worlds that could be brought to life with crystal technology. Of diseases that could be cured. Energy problems that could be solved. There has to be another way, she said. There is, Thalar replied. The way we have offered. Partnership instead of exploitation. Biocrystals instead of quantum theft. But it requires trust between our species, and it requires your people to accept that some things are more valuable left untouched than taken. Jihan picked up a small piece of crystal that had broken naturally from one of the formations. Even this tiny fragment hummed with incredible power. What about these? The pieces that break off naturally? Those we could share, Thalar said. In small quantities, harvested carefully, they could provide samples for your scientists to study. Perhaps in time, they could learn to create similar crystals artificially. But not the main formations? Never. They are too integrated into our world's life systems. Sora stood in the center of the crystal cavern and felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. She could take a quantum crystal, just one small piece, return to human space as a hero who had succeeded where 47 expeditions had failed. But now she understood the true cost of that success. Or she could choose the path her grandfather would have chosen. The path that honored both human needs and the rights of others to exist. The harder path, but perhaps the wiser one. I need to contact the others, she said suddenly. Others? Thalar asked. The expedition ships waiting in orbit. They need to hear about your offer directly. This decision is too important for just two people to make. Thalar considered this, then nodded. There is a way. The crystals can amplify communication signals through the planetary interference, but doing so will reveal our location to your ships. And you trust us not to betray you. I trust that your species is capable of wisdom when given all the facts. Whether they will choose wisdom, that remains to be seen. As Thalar began preparing to make contact with the human ships, Sora sat quietly with her grandfather's journals one last time. In them, she found the strength to make the choice that would determine the future of two species. The old man had been right, as always. Sometimes. The greatest victory came from knowing what not to take. The second day on Verdania Prime began with a discovery that chilled both humans to the bone. As they broke camp in the early morning light, Jihan found something half buried in the soft earth near their fire circle, a piece of crystalline technology that could only have come from the Zephyrite team. Velnara and Kethmore were here, he said, holding up the fragment. This is part of their navigation system. Sora examined the crystal piece. It was partially dissolved, as if something had been eating it. But more disturbing were the tiny holes bored through it. Perfectly round, made by something that fed on crystal itself. They lasted one day, Sora said quietly. The jungle learned to counter their technology faster than anyone expected. As they prepared to move on, the jungle around them seemed different from the night before. The plants that had moved closer to their fire were now arranged in distinct patterns. Flowers pointed in specific directions. Vines formed shapes that almost looked like arrows. It's trying to tell us something, Sora realized. She pulled out her grandfather's notes and found a passage about reading natural signs. Trees that grew in certain directions often indicated water sources or safe paths. Rock formations could warn of unstable ground. Even the behavior of animals could provide guidance to those who knew how to interpret it. The jungle wants us to go that way, she said, pointing along a path indicated by the flower arrangements. How can you be sure it's not leading us into a trap? Because it had all night to kill us while we slept, and it didn't. They followed the subtle guidance, moving through sections of forest that seemed almost manicured. Dangerous plants had withdrawn their poisonous parts. Thorny vines had pulled back to create clear passages. It was as if the jungle was actively helping them navigate. But as they traveled, they encountered evidence of other teams' fates. Scattered equipment that had been corroded by acid plants. Weapons that had been twisted into impossible shapes by vines stronger than steel cables. Most disturbing of all were the areas where teams had simply vanished, clean circles in the jungle where nothing grew, as if the very ground had swallowed explorers whole. 47 expeditions, Jihan said, looking at one such empty circle. All with technology we can't even understand. And the jungle beat them all. Not beat, Sora corrected. Learned from. Every team taught it something new about how to defend itself. They found the remains of the Mantari collective team near a beautiful grove of silver trees. The insectoid explorers had been overcome not by violence, but by paralysis. They lay perfectly preserved, their four arms frozen in defensive positions, their compound eyes still reflecting light. Neural toxin, Sora diagnosed, noting the purple flowers growing around the bodies. But look at the pattern of growth. The flowers had bloomed in a perfect spiral around where the Mantari had been standing. Each flower was a slightly different shade of purple, creating a gradient effect that was hypnotically beautiful. The jungle used their collective intelligence against them, Sora realized. It created a pattern complex enough to overload their shared consciousness. They couldn't process the information fast enough. How do you know all this? My grandfather wrote about similar tactics used by hunters in Korea. When you can't overpower your prey, you confuse it. Make it think too hard about the wrong things. They left the grove respectfully, but not before Sora noticed something important. The spiral pattern of flowers continued beyond the Mantari bodies, extending deeper into the jungle like a pathway. But this pathway led in the wrong direction, away from the center of the continent. It's not trying to help everyone, she told Jihan. The jungle guides some visitors away from the crystals. It only helps those it considers worthy. What makes us worthy when species with thousands of years of advanced evolution aren't? Before Sora could answer, they heard the sound of energy weapons firing in the distance. Bright flashes lit up the canopy as someone fought desperately against unseen enemies. The battle lasted for several minutes, then ended with a sound like breaking glass. The luminoids, Jihan said grimly. They found the battlefield an hour later. The energy beings had fought bravely, their pure consciousness making them nearly invulnerable to physical attacks. But the jungle had found their weakness too. Plants that absorbed energy rather than sunlight had drained their life force, leaving only empty containment suits scattered among the trees. Each team's greatest strength became their weakness, Sora observed. The Draknari's aggression made them easy to provoke into traps. The Zephyrite's technology was turned against them. The Mantari's collective intelligence was overwhelmed. The Luminoid's energy nature was consumed. So what's our greatest strength? And how will the jungle use it against us? Sora was quiet for a long time, considering the question as they continued their journey. The jungle around them remained helpful, clearing paths, providing fresh water from hidden springs, even offering fruit that her grandfather's notes helped her identify as safe to eat. Our strength is adaptation, she finally said. Humans don't have the best technology or the strongest bodies or the most advanced minds, but we learn and change faster than anyone else. That sounds like something the jungle could definitely use against us. Maybe. Or maybe it's exactly what the jungle has been waiting for. They encountered their first major test that afternoon. The path led to a deep ravine that stretched as far as they could see in both directions. At the bottom, hundreds of feet below, something large moved through the shadows. The only way across was a bridge made of living vines. But the vines were moving, constantly shifting and rearranging themselves. No way that's safe, Jihan said. It's obviously designed to drop anyone who tries to cross. But Sora studied the bridge more carefully. The vines moved in a pattern, complex, but not random. It reminded her of something her grandfather had written about crossing mountain streams. The water looked chaotic, but there was always a rhythm to it. Find the rhythm and you could cross safely. It's not trying to drop us, she said. It's testing our timing. She watched the vine bridge for 20 minutes, noting how the movements repeated in cycles. Different sections moved at different speeds, but they all followed the same underlying pattern. Her grandfather had taught her to look for such patterns in everything: the flight of birds, the growth of plants, the flow of water. There, she said, pointing to a specific moment when the vines aligned to create a stable pathway. We have about 30 seconds when it's safe to cross. 30 seconds to cross a 100-meter bridge? We'll have to run. When the pattern aligned again, they sprinted onto the bridge. The vines felt solid under their feet, but Sora could sense the exact moment when they would start shifting again. She grabbed Jihan's hand and pulled him along, counting seconds in her head. They made it across with moments to spare, reaching solid ground just as the vine bridge began its next cycle of movement. Behind them, the structure continued its ancient dance, waiting for the next challengers. How did you know? Jihan asked, breathing hard. My grandfather crossed a lot of rivers during the war. He said moving water always follows patterns, even when it looks random. You just have to watch long enough to see the repetition. That evening they camped near a grove of trees that hummed with gentle music. The sound was hypnotic and beautiful, and both humans found themselves more relaxed than they had been since arriving on the planet. We're almost halfway to the center, Sora said, checking their position against the rough map she had made. But I think the real tests are still ahead. What makes you say that? Everything so far has been about individual skills, courage, intelligence, timing. But my grandfather wrote that the hardest challenges always test your character. As if responding to her words, the musical trees began to change their tune. The gentle humming became more complex, weaving harmonies that seemed to speak directly to something deep in the human mind. Images began to form in the air above them, not holograms, but something created by sound and vibration that triggered visual responses in their brains. They saw Earth as it could be with quantum crystal technology. Dead worlds transformed into gardens, diseases cured by crystal-enhanced medicine, humanity spreading across the galaxy, bringing life to barren planets. But they also saw the cost. Other species displaced as humans expanded. Wars fought over. Crystal resources. The peaceful jungle of Verdania Prime strip-mined and destroyed. It's showing us the future, Jihan said, mesmerized by the visions. It's asking us a question, Sora replied. What will humanity do with the crystals if we get them? The visions continued through the night. Some showed humans using the crystals, wisely, sharing their benefits with other species, preserving Verdania Prime as a protected world. Others showed darker possibilities, greed, exploitation, environmental destruction. As dawn approached, the visions faded and the trees returned to their gentle humming. But the message was clear. The jungle wasn't just testing their ability to reach the crystals. It was testing whether they deserved them. Tomorrow we'll reach the inner barriers, Sora said as they prepared to move on. That's where the real judgment begins. You think we'll pass? Sora looked back at the musical trees, then ahead toward the heart of the continent where the quantum crystals waited. The preparation area buzzed with activity as teams from across the galaxy made ready for the challenge ahead. Each species had claimed a section of the massive hangar, and the differences in their approaches were striking. The Draknari had set up what looked like a military camp. Rextar and his partner, a scarred female warrior named Thexara, practiced combat moves with weapons that hummed with energy. Their armor was black metal that seemed to absorb light. Rextar's roar echoed through the hangar as he destroyed practice targets with his bare claws. Look at them, Jihan said, watching the display. They're treating this like a war. Maybe they're right, Sora replied, but her attention was focused on a small tablet in her hands. She had been studying for 3 days straight, barely sleeping or eating. Near the Draknari camp, the Zephyrhites had created something that looked like a crystal garden. Velnara and her partner Kethmore moved through geometric patterns, while machines scanned their movements. Holographic displays showed complex mathematical equations that hurt to look at directly. Probability calculations, Velnara's voice carried across the hangar. We have analyzed 47,000 possible scenarios and identified optimal paths through the jungle. The Mantari section looked like a hive. Dozens of insect-like creatures swarmed around their two chosen representatives, sharing information through rapid clicking sounds. Speaker Zix stood in the center, her four arms moving in complex gestures as data flowed between the team and their collective. "The swarm shares all knowledge," Zix buzzed. "Our representatives carry the wisdom of 10,000 minds." Even more strange were the luminoids. Their energy forms flickered inside mechanical containment suits while their support team worked on devices that defied easy description. Sparks of pure thought danced between their forms as they communicated in ways that had no words. "Fascinating," one alien observer said. "Each team approaches the challenge from their greatest strength. The Draknari use warrior instinct. The Zephyrite use mathematics. The Mantari use collective intelligence. And the Luminoids use pure consciousness." "And the humans?" another alien asked. The first alien looked toward the small human section of the hangar and shrugged. "I have no idea what they're doing." The human area was indeed puzzling. While other teams had advanced equipment and support staff, Sora and Jihan sat at a simple table with basic camping gear spread around them. Sora had her tablet, but most of her time was spent looking at what appeared to be old photographs and handwritten notes. "These are from your grandfather?" Jihan asked, picking up one of the photographs. It showed an elderly Korean man standing next to a small tent in mountainous terrain. "He documented everything," Sora said. "Every camping trip, every technique he learned. He said knowledge dies if you don't write it down." The photo was old and faded, but Jihan could see the careful way the tent was positioned, sheltered from wind but with clear sight lines in all directions. Simple rope and stakes, but placed with obvious expertise. "He looks like he knew what he was doing," Jihan said. "He survived the Korean War by hiding in the mountains for months," Sora explained. "Enemy soldiers had better weapons, better training, better supplies. But he knew the land, and they didn't." Other photos showed various camping setups, fire arrangements that seemed random but clearly served specific purposes. Shelters built from branches and leaves that blended perfectly with their surroundings. Notes written in Korean covered the back of each photo, explaining techniques and observations. "Can you read his writing?" Jihan asked. "Most of it. He wrote about reading weather patterns, finding water, avoiding dangerous animals. But also..." Sora paused and picked up another photo. "He wrote about understanding the spirit of a place." "The spirit? Every forest, every mountain has its own personality. He said you can't fight the land, you have to work with it, learn what it wants, what it fears, how it thinks." Jihan looked skeptical. "That sounds more like poetry than survival technique." "Maybe. But he lived to 93, so something worked." Their conversation was interrupted by loud laughter from the Draknari camp. Rextar was holding up a human survival manual, showing it to his team. "Look at this primitive nonsense," he boomed. "They plan to defeat the jungle with rope and metal tools?" Other aliens gathered to see what was so amusing. The manual was basic: fire starting, shelter building, water purification. Things that any child from an advanced civilization learned in history classes. "How quaint," Velnara chimed musically. My analysis shows that such primitive tools would fail within 0.7 seconds of encountering Verdanian flora. Zix clicked her mandibles in amusement. The collective has processed similar techniques. They were abandoned by our species over 2,000 years ago as ineffective. Even some of the human observers looked embarrassed. In an age of energy weapons and matter manipulators, camping gear seemed pathetically inadequate. But Sora didn't seem bothered by the mockery. She continued studying her grandfather's notes, sometimes cross-referencing them with footage from failed Verdanian expeditions. Occasionally, she would nod as if something had become clear. "What are you seeing?" Jihan asked quietly. "Remember the Calyx team from 6 months ago?" Sora pulled up a video file. They had sensors that could detect life signs through solid matter, perfect for avoiding predators. The video showed 2 blue-skinned aliens moving confidently through green jungle. Their equipment clearly worked. They easily avoided several camouflaged creatures that would have been invisible to normal eyes. "So what went wrong?" Jihan asked. "Watch day 3. The video jumped ahead. The same aliens were now moving more carefully, their confidence gone. Their sensors still worked, but something had changed. They kept stopping, checking readings, looking. Confused. "The jungle learned," Sora said. "It figured out how their sensors worked and started adapting. Plants changed their life sign patterns. Animals learned to mimic false readings. By day 4, their advantage had become a weakness." She showed more examples. A team with energy shields that worked perfectly until the jungle evolved plants that fed on energy. Warriors with advanced armor that protected them until they encountered acid that had specifically evolved to dissolve their alloy. "Every advanced technique eventually fails," Sora explained. "The jungle learns to counter it. But look at this." She showed footage from much earlier expeditions, times when some teams used simpler tools. These attempts also failed, but they lasted longer. The jungle seemed to take more time learning to counter basic techniques. It's like... Sora paused, trying to find the right words. "The jungle is smart, but it thinks like a computer. It analyzes patterns and develops countermeasures. But my grandfather's techniques aren't based on patterns you can analyze." "What are they based on?" "Instinct, feeling, reading the mood of the land." Sora held up one of the Korean notes. "He writes about listening to what the forest is trying to tell you, not with instruments, but with your senses." Jihan looked around at the other teams with their incredible technology. "You really think intuition can beat all that?" Before Sora could answer, an announcement echoed through the hangar. "All teams report to Briefing Room 7 for final mission parameters." As they walked toward the briefing, aliens continued to comment on the humans' primitive approach. Some seemed amused, others annoyed that their time was being wasted by such obvious failures. "At least their deaths will be quick," Rextar said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The jungle will not waste much effort on such weak prey." "Perhaps that's exactly what we want," Sora murmured to Jihan. "What do you mean?" "My grandfather had a saying, 'The mouse that roars like a lion gets eaten by the cat.' The mouse that stays quiet and clever finds the cheese. In the briefing room, Ambassador Corinth displayed detailed maps of Verdania Prime. The planet was mostly jungle, with the quantum crystal caves located at the exact center. Each team would be dropped at a different point on the planet's edge, roughly equal distances from the goal. Communication with your teams will be impossible once you enter the atmosphere, Corinth explained. Verdania's magnetic field interferes with all known transmission methods. You will be completely on your own. He showed weather patterns, dangerous flora and fauna, and terrain features. The information was overwhelming. Thousands of ways to die on a world that seemed designed to kill visitors. Are there any questions? Corinth asked. Rextar stood. How many teams are you expecting to return? Honestly, based on historical data, we expect 0 survivors, but the rewards are so great that the attempt must be made. Other hands went up. Technical questions about equipment limits, environmental hazards, emergency procedures. Sora listened, but didn't ask anything. Finally, Corinth dismissed them. You leave in 18 hours. Use the time well. As they walked back to their quarters, Jihan noticed that Sora seemed more relaxed than she had been all week. You're not worried anymore, he observed. I just realized something, Sora said. Everyone else is preparing to fight the jungle, but you can't win a fight against an entire planet. So what do we do instead? Sora smiled and pulled out her grandfather's photos one more time. We make friends with it. The massive space station floated like a silver disk against the black of space. Ships from dozens of worlds docked at its ports, bringing representatives from across the galaxy. Inside the main hall, creatures of every shape and size gathered around a holographic display that showed a green planet covered in thick jungle. Kim Sora stood near the back of the crowd, her brown eyes focused on the spinning image. She was shorter than most aliens in the room, with black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her clothes were plain, dark pants and a jacket with many pockets. Nothing about her suggested she was dangerous or special. Next to her, Park Jihan crossed his arms and watched the other species with careful eyes. He was taller than Sora, with broad shoulders and the straight posture of someone with military training. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes never stopped moving, always watching for threats. At the front of the hall, a tall figure with blue skin and 4 arms stepped forward. This was Ambassador Corinth of the Galactic Survival Council. His voice echoed through the chamber as he began to speak. Welcome, beings of the galaxy, Corinth said. Today, we announce the greatest challenge our species have ever faced. For 300 years, the planet Verdania Prime has remained unconquered. Its jungles have claimed the lives of our bravest explorers and most advanced teams. The hologram zoomed in, showing thick green trees that seemed to move on their own. Flowers as large as starships opened and closed like mouths. The ground itself seemed to shift and change color. 47 different species have sent teams to Verdania, Corinth continued. All have failed. Some were never seen again. Others returned broken, speaking of plants that think and ground that hunts. The jungle learns from every attempt to conquer it. A low murmur went through the crowd. Many species had lost their best, people to that green world. The Draknari had sent their finest warriors. The Zephyrite had used their most advanced technology. The Mantari had brought armies of their deadliest fighters. All had failed. But the rewards are beyond measure, Corinth said, and the hologram changed to show glowing crystals buried deep in the planet's core. Quantum crystals, the most valuable substance in the galaxy. These crystals can power star drives, enhance weapons, and provide energy for entire worlds. The species that claims Verdania Prime will have access to enough quantum crystals to transform their civilization. Sora leaned forward slightly. She had read about quantum crystals in her xenobotany studies. Plants could be modified with their energy to grow in any environment, even in space. With those crystals, humans could turn dead worlds into gardens. The rules are simple, Corinth announced. Each species may send one team of 2 members. You will be dropped at different points around the planet. The first team to reach the crystal caves at the planet's center and return with proof will claim the prize for their species. A massive reptilian creature near the front let out a harsh laugh. This was Captain Rextar of the Draknari Empire. His scales were dark green, and his eyes glowed yellow. Scars covered his arms and face, marks of a warrior who had survived many battles. 47 failures, Rextar said in a voice like grinding stone. And yet you still allow primitive species to waste our time. His yellow eyes fixed on the small group of humans. Look at them. Soft skin, weak bodies, no natural weapons. They will die in the first hour. Other aliens murmured agreement. A being made of living crystal spoke in a voice like wind chimes. This was Velnara of the Zephyrite. Our previous team had technology that could see through matter and predict the future. They lasted 3 days. These mammals have nothing. Sora felt the weight of their stares but did not react. She had heard such words before. Humans were always underestimated in galactic society. Too small, too weak, too simple. Most humans let it anger them, or tried to prove how tough they were. Sora just listened and learned. Jihan spoke quietly in her ear. We don't have to do this. The council approved our application, but we can still withdraw. Sora shook her head. My grandfather always said the best opportunities come disguised as impossible challenges. Your grandfather never faced killer plants on an alien world. No. Sora smiled slightly. But he faced things just as dangerous with much less technology than we have. The presentation continued. Corinth showed recordings from previous attempts. The images were disturbing. Trees that grabbed ships from the sky. Flowers that shot poison darts faster than bullets. Ground that opened like jaws to swallow entire teams. Most horrible of all were the recordings that simply ended, teams that vanished without a trace, their equipment found days later with no sign of the explorers. The jungle appears to be semi-sentient, Corinth explained. It learns from each incursion. Traps that failed to catch one team are modified to be more effective against the next. Technology that worked once is somehow anticipated and countered. On future attempts, an insectoid creature with 4 arms raised 1 hand. This was Speaker Zix of the Mantari Collective. Her voice buzzed like angry wasps. If the jungle learns from technology, perhaps the solution is to bring more advanced technology than it has ever seen. Or perhaps, said a voice like electricity, the solution is to avoid technology altogether. This came from one of the luminoids, beings of pure energy contained in mechanical suits. We exist as thought and light. Physical traps cannot harm us, Rextar snorted. Flesh and blood warriors are the answer. My people have conquered 1,000 worlds through strength and courage. As the aliens debated strategies, Sora pulled out a small device and began reviewing files. She had spent months studying every recorded attempt on Verdania Prime. Not the official reports that focused on what technology failed, but the personal logs and environmental data that most people ignored. "What are you looking for?" Jihan asked. "Patterns," Sora said. "Every living system has patterns. The jungle is alive, so it must have patterns too. The best scientists in the galaxy have studied those recordings. They found nothing." "They were looking for the wrong things," Sora said. "They looked for weaknesses in the jungle's defenses. I'm looking for clues about how it thinks." Corinth raised his hands for silence. "Teams have 1 week to prepare. Transportation to Verdania Prime departs in 7 standard days. May fortune favor the worthy." As the crowd began to disperse, many aliens cast dismissive glances at the humans. Some laughed openly. Others shook their heads as if watching children play at being warriors. Rextar approached them directly. His massive form towered over both humans. "I almost feel sorry for your species," he said. "To send their people to die for nothing. When my team claims the crystals, I will dedicate our victory to your memory." "That's very kind," Sora said politely. "Good luck to you as well." Rextar stared at her for a moment, perhaps expecting fear or anger. When he saw only calm acceptance, he grunted and walked away. Velnara drifted past like a walking chandelier. "Your sacrifice will provide valuable data about the jungle's current capabilities," she said in her musical voice. "My calculations show a 0.23% chance of human survival past the first day." "I'll keep that in mind," Sora replied. After most aliens had left, Jihan turned to his partner. "Are you sure about this? Maybe they're right. Maybe we're not ready for something like this." Sora looked up at the hologram of Verdania Prime, still spinning slowly above them. The green jungle seemed to pulse with its own life, beautiful and terrible. "My grandfather used to say that battles are won not by the strongest or the smartest, but by those who understand what they're really fighting." "And what are we really fighting?" Sora smiled and began walking toward the exit. "That's what we need to figure out."